In 1983, a contractor named Daniel Walsh vanished during a government-funded job in the New Mexico desert. His truck was found abandoned, engine cold, keys in the ignition. The case was ruled a disappearance until 12 years later. Because 12 years after Daniel's disappearance, his widow received a cassette tape in the mail. No note, no return address. On that tape was a voice. Daniel's voice. Recorded days after the date he was declared dead.
"Mara, if you're hearing this, I don't have much time."
What was captured on that tape would reopen a cold case, expose a government experiment called Project Widow, and unleash something that was never meant to be heard. Tonight, we press play on one of the strangest true crime mysteries ever recorded. Subscribe for more true crime stories unearthed from the dark. On a mid-January morning in 1996, thin, quiet snow fell across Amarillo, Texas, dusting the world in gray. Mara Walsh sat alone at the kitchen table, the radio whispering weather alerts no one listened to anymore. Her house still smelled faintly of the varnish Daniel had used when he built the cabinets 20 years ago. She'd stopped noticing it until that morning, when she opened the last moving box, one she'd avoided since 1983. Inside, beneath a folded blanket and a stack of tax folders, lay a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. The postmark was faded, the edges stiff with age. She frowned. Her own name, Mrs. Mara Walsh, was written in uneven black ink. The return address, Elridge, New Mexico. Her pulse stumbled. That was where Daniel's truck had been found, abandoned on the side of Route 62. The engine cold and the key still in the ignition. She turned the package over, searching for a date. None. Just the strange dark circle of a partial postal seal and a faint smell of dust and oil. The paper felt waxy. She slid it open carefully with the edge of a butter knife. A cassette tape slid into her palm, black, scuffed, unlabeled except for 2 words written in a familiar, slanted hand. Play me. For a moment she thought it had to be a prank, maybe a cruel joke from one of those late-night radio true crime hobbyists who had rediscovered Daniel's case last year. But the handwriting, she'd know that anywhere. Daniel always looped the M like a mountain ridge. Her hands shook as she carried the tape to the living room. The old Sony deck still sat beneath the TV, dusty but functional. She slid the cassette in, pressed play, and waited. A soft static hiss filled the room, followed by the sound of breathing, shallow, strained. Then, "Mara, if you're hearing this, I don't have much time." The voice was unmistakable. Daniel, older maybe, hoarser, but his. The same cadence, the same quiet confidence that used to steady her when storms rolled through at night. "They told me not to call. Not to write, said it would put you in danger. But I can't do this anymore. They've got me working on something I shouldn't have touched. If anyone finds this tape..." A sharp sound, metal scraping concrete. Then silence, except for the steady hum of wind. Mara froze, leaning closer as if proximity could conjure more words. "Don't trust anyone from Elridge," Daniel's voice whispered suddenly. "Especially..." The tape cut out mid-word, replaced by the empty click of the reel spinning. Mara sat there for a long time, staring at the machine, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. For 12 years, every possible explanation, accident, affair, desertion, had circled her mind like carrion birds. Now there was a new one. Daniel was alive when she thought him dead. When the shock eased, she rewound the tape and played it again. The same pauses, the same abrupt cutoff. She turned the cassette over, pressed side B. At first, nothing, then a faint, rhythmic thump, a scraping sound. A man's muffled voice, not Daniel's, muttering something low and indecipherable. Then, clear as a bell, 5 knocks, evenly spaced. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed faintly, like someone rapping on metal inside a hollow space. Her body went rigid. Somewhere in the distance, a freight train wailed, the same kind she'd heard in his message. She turned toward the window instinctively, half expecting headlights through the snow. But there was only darkness and her own reflection. She ejected the tape and set it on the table, wrapping her arms around herself. The house felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. By midnight, she had already called the Amarillo police. They logged the tape as potential evidence and promised to send it for analysis, but Mara could tell by the dispatcher's tone that they didn't believe it was real. Too old, too strange, too late. After she hung up, she sat in the dark, listening to the wind rattle the loose pane above the sink. At 2:17 a.m., the phone rang once. Just once. When she picked it up, there was no voice. Only the faint hiss of static, the same sound from the beginning of the tape. The call lasted exactly 9 seconds before the line went dead. Mara stood there, the receiver pressed to her ear, her breath shallow. Then she whispered to the empty room, "Daniel, what did you find?" Outside, the snow kept falling, silent, endless, covering the world like a shroud. Morning brought the kind of brittle cold that made every sound sharp. Frost clung to the inside of Mara's windshield as she steered her aging Buick down the county road toward the sheriff's office. The cassette sat on the passenger seat, sealed inside a plastic kitchen bag. She kept glancing at it, half expecting it to move. Traffic was sparse, just ranch trucks and the occasional school bus. Her wipers screeched once, clearing a thin fog from the glass. The local radio hummed with country music and farm reports until the news segment came on. Another cold case revived in Albuquerque, an arson reclassified as homicide. Mara turned the volume down. She didn't want coincidences this morning. Sheriff Cole Bradham had been a deputy back when Daniel disappeared. He'd aged into his badge, gray threading through his mustache. The drawl slower, but the eyes just as steady. When she stepped into the small station, the air smelled of burnt coffee and floor polish. A Christmas wreath drooped on the wall even though it was mid-January. "Mara," Bradham said, rising from behind his cluttered desk. "Been a while. What brings you in?" She didn't answer at first. She reached into her purse, withdrew the plastic bag, and set it on the desk. The cassette gleamed dully under the fluorescent lights. "I found this yesterday," she said. "It came from Elridge." It's Daniel's voice. Bradham's expression shifted, curiosity first, then caution. "Elridge, New Mexico? That's where they found his truck." She nodded. "The postmark's old, but I don't know how old. It must have been mailed years ago and got lost." He pulled on latex gloves and slid the cassette from the bag, squinting at the scuffed surface. "You play it?" "Yes. And it's Daniel. He says he's in trouble. He says not to trust anyone from Elridge." She hesitated. "Then it cuts off." Bradham placed the tape carefully on a clean blotter pad. "Could be a hoax. There's a bunch of those true crime nuts digging through archives these days." "It's not a hoax," she said quietly. "I know my husband's voice." Bradham studied her face, then sighed. "All right. Let's make this official. We'll log it and schedule state pickup for tomorrow. In the meantime, keep it sealed and avoid handling." He motioned toward the evidence form. "Mind writing how you came by it?" As she filled out the sheet, her hand trembled slightly. 12 years of trying to move on collapsed into the scratch of her pen. When she finished, Bradham leaned back. "You remember anything strange around the time Daniel disappeared? Calls, visitors?" "I've told this story so many times I could recite it in my sleep," she said. "He left Friday for a business trip. He called Saturday morning from a payphone outside Elridge. Said they'd hit some delays. After that, nothing. His partner's body turned up in the desert 2 weeks later. They said Daniel probably killed him and ran. Bradham's jaw tightened. "You never bought that." "No, and now, this," she gestured toward the tape. He nodded slowly. "All right, I'll have our tech make a copy. See if we can clean up the audio. You keep the faith, Mara outside. The cold wind caught her scarf as she walked back to the car. For the first time in years, she felt the faint pulse of purpose. By afternoon, the weather had cleared. Mara stopped at the grocery store for bread and cat food, trying to pretend the day was ordinary. In the checkout line, she noticed a man in a brown leather jacket watching her. Not staring exactly, just aware. When she looked directly at him, he smiled politely and turned away. On the drive home, she saw his same truck, an old Ford, 2 cars behind her for nearly 5 miles. It turned off only after she pulled into her driveway. Her stomach knotted. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. Inside, the house was quiet, except for the ticking of the old wall clock. She hung her coat and went to the kitchen. The phone rang before she could pour coffee. Unknown number. Mara Walsh? A male voice asked. Young, crisp, professional. Yes. This is Detective Alan Bishop with the State Cold Case Division. Sheriff Bradham forwarded your cassette report to us. I'd like to come by tomorrow morning to discuss it. She hesitated. Of course. Don't play or handle the tape anymore, he added. We'll need to preserve prints and residue. All right. See you at 10. When he hung up, she realized her hands were shaking again. Night fell early. She tried reading but couldn't focus. Every noise seemed amplified. The settling house, the heater kicking on, the distant hum of a passing train. At 9:30, she decided to listen once more. She told herself it was to prepare for the detective's questions, but truthfully, she just wanted to hear Daniel's voice again. She set the cassette into the deck and pressed play. The static began. His breathing. Then, Mara, if you're hearing this, I don't have much time. She mouthed the words along with him, her heart aching. But when the tape reached the part where it had cut off before, something new happened. A brief click, then more sound. A voice, low, unfamiliar. He shouldn't have told you. Then silence again. She rewound, played it back twice to be sure. The phrase was there, grainy but clear. Someone else had been on the recording all along. Mara shut off the machine, staring at the cassette as if it might bleed secrets. The phrase looped in her mind. He shouldn't have told you. A draft slipped through the kitchen window, rattling the blinds. Somewhere outside, a car engine idled for several seconds before driving away. She went to the window, pulling the curtain just enough to peer out. Nothing but tire tracks glistening in the frost. At 10:04 p.m., she finally locked every door and left a lamp burning in each room. Upstairs, as she settled into bed, she whispered Daniel's name once, the sound barely audible in the dark. For the first time in years, she dreamed of him. Not the way he'd looked in photographs, but older, gaunt, standing at the edge of a desert road, mouthing words she couldn't hear over the rising wind. When she woke, the clock read 3:11 a.m., and from somewhere downstairs came the faint click of the tape deck starting by itself. Detective Alan Bishop arrived the next morning right on time, a state-issue sedan pulling up to the curb just as the clock struck 10. Mara watched through the lace curtain as he stepped out. Mid-30s, neatly pressed coat, the kind of posture that suggested both discipline and weariness. His eyes scanned the neighborhood before he approached her door. When she opened it, cold air swept through the hallway. Mrs. Walsh? Yes, come in, detective. He nodded politely, wiping his shoes on the mat. Appreciate you seeing me on short notice. Mara led him to the kitchen. The cassette sat in its plastic bag on the table like evidence waiting for judgment. Bishop's gaze landed on it immediately. You handled it with gloves after your first listen? I didn't touch the tape directly since then. Good. He produced a small recorder from his briefcase. For documentation, I'll need to capture your statement. As he sat up, Mara noticed the faint tremor in his left hand. Not nerves, Fatigue, maybe. Or something heavier. He began formally. Date, time, location. Then his questions came steady and precise. When did you last hear from your husband before his disappearance? October 12th, 1983. He called from a payphone near Elridge. And this package arrived yesterday morning. Was there any accompanying note? No, just the tape. He nodded, jotting notes on a yellow pad. His handwriting was methodical, compact. And you're certain this is your husband's voice? Absolutely. Bishop studied her expression for a moment, then leaned forward slightly. I believe you, Mrs. Walsh. I've read your case file. That surprised her. You have. Your husband's disappearance was one of 6 unresolved cases in that region between 82 and 85. The others involved subcontractors working a government research site outside Elridge. All small companies, low profile, but the same supplier chain. I was reviewing them when Sheriff Bradham called. Mara felt a chill crawl up her neck. So you think Daniel's case connects to something larger? I think it might, Bishop said carefully. But we'll let the evidence speak first. He slipped on gloves and lifted the cassette. The cassette clicked in its shell. I'll take this to our lab in Lubbock this afternoon. They can analyze the voice, enhance background sounds. If your husband mentioned anyone or anything identifiable, we'll hear it. Mara hesitated, then said, There's something else. She led him to the living room, where the old tape deck sat silent. Last night it turned on by itself. I hadn't touched it since you called. I heard something, a voice. Not Daniel's. Someone said, He shouldn't have told you. Bishop's brow furrowed. And you're certain it came from the tape deck? Yes. He crouched to inspect the machine. Mind if I take this too? If you think it'll help. I do. He traced the power cord to the outlet, then unplugged it. Sometimes tape heads retain magnetic residue that can distort or replay old sounds, but it's better I check it myself. He carried the deck carefully to his briefcase. I'll run both through audio forensics. Should have results in a few days. Mara poured coffee for them both. Bishop accepted his cup but didn't drink. Instead, he scanned the kitchen, the photographs on the fridge, the worn clock above the sink. Your husband built this house himself, didn't he? Yes, every nail. He said if you build something with your hands, it remembers you. Bishop gave a faint smile. Then this place remembers him well. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, the only sound the faint ticking of the clock. Finally, Mara asked, Do you think he's alive? Bishop's gaze held hers. 12 years is a long time, but sometimes people vanish for reasons that keep them breathing. If that's what you're hoping, Mrs. Walsh, don't let anyone take that from you yet. He stood to leave. I'll be in touch by the end of the week. By afternoon, the house felt emptier than before. Mara tried to occupy herself. Laundry, dusting, simple tasks. But her mind kept replaying Daniel's voice, that desperate whisper. She turned the phrase over and over. They told me not to call, not to write. Who were they? At 4:30, the phone rang again. She hurried to answer, expecting Bishop. Instead, static hissed faintly on the line. Then a man's voice, strained, low, urgent. Mara! It's me. Her knees nearly gave out. Daniel? They're watching. Don't. The line cut to silence. Mara? A second voice came through, calm, male, unfamiliar. Ma'am, this is the phone company. We're checking on a dropped call in your area. Did someone hang up? She gripped the receiver. No, someone called me. Sorry, ma'am, we're tracing a malfunction on your line. You might experience interference. Then that line also went dead. Mara stood motionless, phone pressed to her ear until the dial tone returned. When she finally hung up, she noticed the faintest movement outside the window. A man's silhouette standing across the street near the telephone pole. He wore a brown jacket, the same one she'd seen at the grocery store. She drew the curtain closed. That night, Mara dreamed of a hallway lined with doors. Behind each, a different voice whispered her name. When she reached the last door, she heard Daniel crying softly, and a rhythmic knocking echoed somewhere in the dark. She woke near dawn, her throat dry. For a long time she lay staring at the ceiling, listening. Then she realized she could still hear the knocking, faint, distant, coming from somewhere inside the house. She rose quietly, pulled on her robe, and followed the sound down the stairs. The air was freezing. She could see her breath in the half-light. The knocking came again, 3 precise beats. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't the door. It was below her, from the cellar. Mara hesitated at the top of the basement stairs. Her hand trembled on the railing. The air smelled faintly of metal and dust. She turned on the light and descended one creaking step at a time. At the bottom, she scanned the shadows between the shelves of paint cans and old tools. Everything was still. Then the knocking came once more, closer this time. From behind the far wall, where the old fuse box was mounted. She froze. The sound wasn't echoing. It was inside the wall. Slowly, she pressed her palm against the plaster. The vibrations pulsed beneath her fingertips like a faint heartbeat. Something, or someone, was on the other side. By morning, the basement wall felt like a bruise against Mara's thoughts. She'd spent hours after the knocking stopped, sitting on the lowest step, waiting for it to begin again. It never did, but she knew what she'd felt. Vibration, steady, deliberate. When Detective Bishop called at 9, she almost dropped the phone. "Mrs. Walsh?" "It's Bishop. I'm on the highway back from Lubbock. I've got preliminary results." Her voice wavered. "Did you find anything?" "A few things. Enough that I'd like to go over them in person." He arrived less than an hour later, looking more tired than the day before. The dark circles beneath his eyes had deepened, and his tie was loosened. He carried a brown evidence envelope under his arm. Mara led him straight to the kitchen. What did they find? He placed the envelope on the table, opened it, and drew out a transcript sheet. The audio team confirmed the tape is authentic, no splices, no modern duplication. It was recorded on a portable handheld unit, likely early 80s, but there's background interference, steady frequency, almost like an engine or generator. Daniel worked construction. Could it be machinery? Possibly, but that's not the strange part. He slid a photograph toward her, a visual spectrogram of the tape's audio. When we filtered out the background noise, another layer appeared, buried beneath his voice. She studied the image. A dense band of sound patterns curved through the lower register. "What is it?" A second voice, Bishop said quietly, fainter, slowed down, as if the recorder picked up someone whispering at the same time. The words are hard to isolate, but our tech thinks it says, "He knows." Mara's breath caught. He knows what? That's what I'm hoping to find out. He sat back, rubbing his temples. There's something else. You said you received the package by mail. No return address, correct? Yes. The postage stamp. It's a limited series issued last year in Kansas, but the ink on the postmark matches a discontinued brand of black pigment used by the Postal Service until 1985. Mara frowned. That doesn't make sense. Unless someone kept the materials deliberately. Bishop's gaze drifted toward the basement door. You said you heard knocking last night. Still happening? No, but there was something behind the wall. He rose immediately. Show me. They descended together. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of concrete and dust. Bishop's flashlight beam swept across the shelves, the furnace. The tools hung neatly on their hooks. There, Mara whispered, pointing to the far wall. That's where it came from. Bishop knelt and pressed his ear to the plaster. Silence. He tapped lightly with his knuckle. The sound was hollow. May I? He asked. She nodded. He pulled a small pocket knife from his coat and carefully pried at a corner of the wall near the fuse box. A fragment of plaster crumbled away, revealing aged wood beneath, then a sliver of rusted metal. Bishop looked up at her. "This wall isn't solid." Bishop's voice dropped to a murmur. "It's not part of the original structure." He widened the opening with slow, precise movements. Dust sifted down in lazy gray curls. Beneath the plaster was a thin metal panel, its surface pitted with rust and faintly oily to the touch. "What would Daniel have hidden back there?" Mara asked, her voice unsteady. Bishop didn't answer immediately. He felt along the edges of the panel, found a small notch, and wedged his knife into it. A soft click sounded, followed by a faint groan as the metal loosened. He pulled the panel away. Behind it yawned a narrow cavity, less than a foot deep, lined with old insulation and shadow. He shone his flashlight inside. Mara leaned closer. "What is it?" He reached in and withdrew a small object wrapped in brown cloth. The fabric disintegrated in his gloved hands, revealing a reel of magnetic audio tape. Larger than the cassette she'd received, more industrial-looking, the kind used in professional recorders. The reel was labeled in faded handwriting. Tape 3, September 17th, 1983. Bishop exhaled slowly. "Your husband left more than one recording." Mara stared at it, speechless. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. "Why hide it here?" she whispered. "Because he didn't trust whoever was listening." Bishop turned the reel over in his hands. "The man on your cassette, Daniel." He sounded scared but coherent. If this predates that, it might explain what he knew. He carefully slipped the reel into an evidence bag. "I'll take this for analysis." "It's fragile. Old tape like this can crumble. But we'll transfer it digitally." Mara nodded, still staring at the hole in the wall. Daniel worked in field acoustics for a contractor back then. He used to bring home test reels, said he was monitoring structural resonance at sites outside Elridge government work. She hesitated. He never said. Only that some projects weren't supposed to exist on maps. Bishop looked at her sharply. "Mrs. Walsh, were any of his co-workers ever reported missing?" Her memory flickered. Faces at barbecues, names in old holiday cards. "Yes, a man named Connors and a woman, Leah Sturgis." They both vanished the same year Daniel did. Bishop's expression tightened. "Those are two of the cases I mentioned yesterday." They both fell silent. The basement seemed to hold its breath. After a moment, Bishop replaced the metal panel loosely against the wall. "Don't touch this area again," he said softly. "If someone hid that tape here, they might have reason to come back for it." Mara's stomach turned cold. "You think someone's been in the house?" "I think someone wanted you to find the first tape, but not this one." That night, as Bishop drove away with the evidence bag on the seat beside him, Mara stood in the doorway watching his taillights vanish down the street. Behind her, the house creaked. An old timber settling, or perhaps something else. When she finally turned back inside, she caught sight of a dark smear on the floor near the basement door, a streak of soot or oil, shaped almost like a handprint. She froze. The print wasn't there before Bishop arrived. The next day brought rain, thin, silver threads against a sky the color of lead. Mara sat by the kitchen window, listening to the quiet hiss of water on the roof. She hadn't slept much. Every creak in the floorboards had sounded like someone walking beneath her. At 9:30, her phone rang. "Mrs. Walsh, it's Bishop. I've got the reel set up for playback at the lab." His voice was calm but threaded with fatigue. "I thought you'd want to listen in remotely. We've set up a line so you can hear what I hear." Mara swallowed. "Yes, please." He gave her a number to dial. When the connection clicked, she heard a faint hum, like distant electricity, and Bishop's voice. "All right, starting tape 3. A brief hiss of static. Then Daniel's voice filled the line. Younger, steady, professional. Audio log. September 17th. Test number 46. Elridge site perimeter. Unit B. There was a pause, followed by faint background noise. Wind, and something else beneath it, rhythmic and deep, like breathing through machinery. Signal amplitude holding steady. Low-frequency oscillation matches subsurface mapping, but the harmonics, they're changing, almost like it's responding. Mara pressed the receiver tighter to her ear. Daniel sounded analytical, but something in his tone wavered between curiosity and unease. We've been hearing tones, not interference. They come from the rock. Shaw says it's pressure variance, but I don't buy it. Sounds too structured, like... There was a sharp knock in the background. Daniel's breath hitched. Jesus, someone's at the... Static flared. When it cleared, his voice was quieter. If anyone finds this, check the sub-basement files. Don't trust management. They know what's down here. It's not seismic. The recording ended abruptly. Bishop's voice returned. That's all. Tape stops there. Mara realized she was trembling. That was him, months before he disappeared. Yes, Bishop said, and he mentioned others. They know what's down here. That matches something I found. Paper rustled faintly over the line. According to the archives, Elridge's project was officially closed in December of '83, but field reports continued for another 6 months under a different code name. Project Widow. Mara's heart pounded. Widow. Your husband's nickname for you was My Widow, wasn't it? She closed her eyes. He said it jokingly, because he worked such long hours. Said I'd end up one before my time. Bishop exhaled slowly. Then either someone thought it was ironic, or Daniel named the project himself. Thunder rolled faintly through the line. I'll request the declassified files, Bishop said. In the meantime, stay home. Keep the doors locked. And if anyone tries to contact you about these tapes, call me first. When the call ended, Mara sat in silence, the receiver still in her hand, rain whispering against the window. Somewhere beneath the steady patter, she thought she heard it again, the faint rhythm Daniel had described. A low pulsing beat, not from the ground, but from within the walls of her house. By late afternoon, Bishop sat alone in his office at the county building. The sky outside deepening to iron gray. The lab's hum surrounded him. Computers, audio analyzers, the muted chatter of other investigators in distant rooms. But his focus was fixed on the reel-to-reel player in front of him. He'd listened to the tape 6 times. Each time, he caught something new. Not words, tones. They rose and fell with Daniel Walsh's voice, synchronized as though reacting to his speech. Bishop ran a spectral analysis, mapping the frequencies into a visual pattern. When the screen filled with jagged blue lines, he froze. The tones weren't random. They formed a pulse graph, 5 repeating shapes, each almost identical, separated by intervals that spelled out a rhythm. When he mapped the timing to Morse, it appeared to spell M-A-R-A. An interpretation, not proof. He sat back, rubbing his temples. It was impossible. Audio anomalies couldn't spell names, but the data didn't lie. He saved the file, encrypted it, then reached for his case notebook. Every instinct told him that whatever Project Widow had been, Daniel had stumbled onto something meant to stay buried. At that moment, a shadow fell across the frosted glass of his office door. "Come in," Bishop said. It was Chief Hartley, his superior, a heavy-set man with a calm voice and unreadable eyes. "You're still chasing that Walsh file?" "Yes, sir." "There's new evidence." Hartley stepped inside, shutting the door quietly. "I saw your requisition for Elridge project records. You won't get them. They're sealed under federal classification." Bishop frowned. "Sir, that project was terminated in '83. There's no active security interest." Hartley's expression didn't change. "Drop it, Alan." Bishop stared at him. "Is this coming from you or Washington?" Hartley didn't answer. He simply adjusted his coat and left, leaving the door ajar. When the door clicked shut, Bishop felt something cold settle in his chest. He waited until the hall was silent, then opened a hidden drawer in his desk. Inside was a small cassette labeled Internal Bishop 1. He pressed record. Log, 6:42 p.m. Subject, Project Widow. Confirmation of interference from command level. Possible suppression of 1983 disappearances. Tones within tape 3 correspond to coded sequence spelling Mara. Intent unclear. Proceeding independently, he clicked it off and locked the drawer again. Meanwhile, across town, Mara tried to distract herself by cleaning Daniel's old study. She dusted the bookshelves, reorganized the desk drawers, and found herself staring at a small brass key in an envelope labeled Office. She didn't remember seeing it before. When she turned it over, faint numbers were engraved on the back. B17. She frowned. Daniel had never owned a safe. Her gaze drifted to the old floor vent beneath the desk. Something metallic glimmered behind the grate. Mara knelt, pried the cover loose, and reached inside. Her fingers brushed against cold metal, the corner of a small lockbox. She lifted it free. A thick layer of dust coated the lid. On the front, a matching inscription was stamped faintly into the steel. B17. Project Widow. Rain turned to mist overnight, leaving the morning quiet and gray. Mara hadn't slept. The lockbox sat on Daniel's desk like something alive, small, rectangular, cold. Every time she tried to look away, her eyes found it again. She'd tried the brass key once before dawn. It didn't turn easily. When it finally did, a faint metallic click echoed through the empty house like a whisper. Inside were 3 objects: a roll of undeveloped 35mm film, a folded map of the Elridge area with red circles drawn in the margins, and a small, unmarked cassette labeled in smudged pencil. Playback, not alone. Mara stared at the cassette. The handwriting wasn't Daniel's. Her stomach twisted. She set the tape aside, unrolled the map. The circles weren't random. They formed a perimeter along a stretch of county road that had been sealed after a landslide in 1984. Near the bottom corner, Daniel had scrawled a note. Keep listening. They wake when heard. Her pulse quickened. They wake when heard. What could that mean? The phone rang. Mara, Bishop's voice, urgent but low. Don't touch anything else. I'm coming over. I opened the box, she said quietly. A pause. Then it started. The line went dead. When Bishop arrived 20 minutes later, his coat was soaked, his face pale with exhaustion. He closed the door behind him, glancing instinctively toward the window. You shouldn't have opened it alone. It had his name on it, she said. And mine. He approached the desk, slipping on gloves. His eyes narrowed at the cassette. That handwriting isn't your husband's. I know. He examined the roll of film next, holding it to the light. Old Kodak stock. If it's been stored this long, it'll need careful development. Then he unrolled the map. His finger traced the circles. These match excavation points around the Elridge sinkhole zone. But this note, he read the line aloud. They wake when heard. He looked at her. Did Daniel ever talk about hearing things underground? She nodded slowly. Yes, low tones. He said sometimes the instruments picked up vibrations like voices. Voices? He said they weren't human. Bishop folded the map carefully. We'll process this, but that tape comes first. He set the cassette into Mara's old player, the same one that had turned on by itself nights ago. Static hissed, followed by silence. Then, faintly, breathing. A man's voice emerged, whispering just above the threshold of hearing. If you found this, they've already moved. The tape crackled. They listen through sound. Keep quiet. The signal. A violent burst of distortion filled the room. A piercing, oscillating tone that made Mara cover her ears. The sound seemed to vibrate through her bones. Then the player shut itself off. The silence afterward felt wrong, dense, expectant, as if something unseen had turned its attention toward them. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Bishop rewound the tape by hand, cautious not to press the power button again. That frequency wasn't random, he muttered. It wasn't feedback. Something embedded a pulse signal into the recording. Ultrasonic, maybe even coded. Mara's voice shook. You think someone put it there on purpose? Yes. The question is why he slipped the cassette into an evidence pouch, sealing it carefully. That tone, it's a kind of activation marker. You could hide instructions inside a sound pattern. Military research tried things like that in the 70s. Instructions for what? He didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the living room window, where the mist outside pressed against the glass like a living thing. I need to take this to the lab tonight, but I also need to warn you, someone's watching the house. Mara's breath caught. You've seen them? Bishop nodded once. A silver sedan, parked 2 blocks down since dawn. Not ours. Not local. Mara crossed her arms, shivering despite the heat. Who are they? People who don't want this case reopened. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. When I requested the Project Widow files, the system flagged my clearance. That only happens when a case ties to ongoing federal work. It means someone still owns whatever Daniel found. He gathered the evidence bags. I'll contact you tomorrow. Don't answer the door for anyone, not even police unless they show this badge. He placed his ID on the table for her to memorize. As he turned to leave, Mara caught his sleeve. Detective, if Daniel was right, if the sounds were coming from under that site. What if it's still active? Bishop's eyes met hers. For a heartbeat, his professional mask slipped. Beneath it was genuine fear. Then we're already too late. The drive back to the county building took less than 20 minutes. By the time Bishop arrived, the rain had turned to a fine drizzle. He parked in the underground lot, locked the cassette inside a briefcase, and headed toward the elevator. Halfway across the lobby, a man in a dark suit intercepted him. Detective Bishop? The stranger's voice was smooth, his smile polite but wrong somehow. He held a laminated identification card that flashed only for a second, enough for Bishop to catch the words Federal Operations Division before it vanished into the man's pocket again. Agent Keller, the stranger said. We need to talk about the Walsh materials. Bishop tensed. You're not on my chain of command. Your investigation overlaps ours. Keller's eyes were a cold, pale gray. You've already viewed restricted media. Hand it over. Bishop's jaw clenched. Under whose authority? Under the authority that decides what the public should forget. A nation that hums together, obeys together. Keller's smile thinned. You've heard the sound by now, haven't you? Bishop said nothing. Good, Keller murmured. Then you know it's not meant to be played twice. He turned and walked away, leaving Bishop alone in the fluorescent corridor with the hum of the ceiling lights pulsing faintly. 5 rhythmic beats, slow and deliberate. The same pattern that had spelled M-A-R-A. Miles away, Bishop's sedan ate up the highway, wipers smearing the drizzle into gray streaks. He'd left the city before sunrise, the duplicate tape locked in his glove compartment. Every few miles, he thought he heard the faint hum, the same low oscillation Daniel Walsh had recorded in the desert 12 years earlier. He tried to drown it with the radio, but the hum stayed, matching his heartbeat. When the interstate curved toward open country, a black SUV appeared in his rearview mirror. It kept its distance, headlights steady. He switched lanes. It followed. He accelerated. It matched. Bishop's hands tightened on the wheel. Keller. He turned off onto a service road flanked by flat scrubland and telephone poles leaning against the wind. The SUV followed for half a mile, then slowed, letting him pull ahead. The silence afterward felt staged. Permission to run. He stopped near an abandoned way station and killed the engine. The air inside the car vibrated faintly. He opened the glove box, removed the tape, and stared at it. "You're what they're after," he muttered. What the hell did he find? He reached for his recorder to dictate a note, but the recorder switched on by itself, the reels spinning soundlessly. From the speaker came Daniel's voice, faint and warped. "You can't stop it, Alan. Once you've heard them." Static drowned the rest. Bishop snapped the recorder off, heart hammering. He looked up and saw the SUV stop 50 yards behind him. Two men stood beside it, silhouettes against the flat horizon. One raised a hand, palm outward, in a slow, deliberate gesture, 5 fingers extended, then curled into a fist. 5 pulses. The rhythm again. Bishop shoved the cassette into his coat pocket, restarted the car, and sped away. In Amarillo, Mara sat in the dim light of late morning, the photograph spread before her. The face in the final frame, her own, still stared back. She felt her reflection in the window watching her as though it too were listening. Then she noticed the old television flickering, though it wasn't turned on. A faint pattern rippled across the dark screen, in time with a sound she could just barely hear. A deep, droning tone that pulsed 5 times and faded. The house seemed to breathe. She backed away slowly, clutching the nearest photograph. The walls creaked. The air pressure shifted, and from the basement came a sequence of dull knocks, 5, evenly spaced. Her phone rang. She snatched it up without checking the number. "Mara," Bishop's voice rasped, distorted by motion and interference. "They're shutting everything down. If you want answers, meet me." The signal warped, breaking into that same pulsing tone. "Meet me where he disappeared." Then the line went dead. Mara stood in the middle of the kitchen, pulse racing. The photographs, the tapes, the map. They all pointed to one place. Elridge. She looked out the window. The sky over the western horizon was darkening, though it was still morning, as if something vast were moving beneath the clouds. Mara whispered to herself, "I'm coming, Daniel." She gathered the tapes and the map, slid them into a canvas bag, and stepped out into the cold, the hum following her like breath on the back of her neck. The highway stretched empty toward the New Mexico border, a pale ribbon under an afternoon sky the color of old pewter. Mara drove with both hands tight on the wheel, the canvas bag in the passenger seat whispering each time the car jolted. Inside were the 2 tapes, the photographs, and Daniel's map folded soft with use. Every mile closer to Elridge seemed to thin the air. The radio offered only static. Even the wind felt muffled, as though sound itself had gone cautious. She passed the sign, Elridge County Limits, its paint peeled away by sand. Beyond it, the landscape flattened into scrub and pale earth. In the distance, the skeletal remains of machinery jutted from the hills. Drilling towers, rusted cranes, a collapsed dome of concrete, half buried in dust. Mara slowed, checking the map. The circles Daniel had drawn marked a service road looping behind the main site. She followed it, tires crunching over gravel until she reached a chain-link fence bowed inward by years of wind. A faded warning hung askew. No entry. Federal property. The lock had long rusted. She pushed the gate open and drove through. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain on iron. She parked beside what had once been a loading bay. The wide steel doors were half open, darkness yawning inside. For a long moment she sat motionless, gripping the steering wheel. Then she remembered Daniel's words from the tape. "Don't trust anyone from Elridge." She whispered, "I'm not here to trust anyone." A low hum reached her ears, not from the car, not from the wind. It seemed to rise from the ground itself, pulsing 5 times, then pausing. Mara stepped out, the sound vibrating faintly through her shoes. Inside the loading bay, dust hung like smoke. The beam of her flashlight swept over stacks of crates and toppled filing cabinets. Papers lay scattered across the floor, Their ink faded to ghostly gray. On one wall, painted in stenciled black letters, was a single word: widow. Her light trembled. "Daniel," the word echoed back, distorted by the cavernous space. "Neil! Neil!" She moved deeper, past the remnants of a control room where broken monitors reflected her flashlight in fractured shards. The deeper she went, the stronger the vibration became. A steady pressure in her ribs, as if the entire building breathed. At the end of a corridor, she found an elevator shaft, its doors forced open. A service ladder ran down into darkness. Daniel's map had marked a circle here. Sub-basement B-17. Mara clipped the flashlight to her coat and began to climb. Halfway down, the hum changed pitch. No longer a single note, but layers, like overlapping voices. Some part of her mind wanted to believe it was machinery. Another part recognized syllables. Her foot slipped on the next rung. The voices rose in unison, and for an instant, she thought she heard her own name. Mara? The sound was both distant and impossibly close, like someone whispering from inside her ear. The air grew colder as Mara descended. The light from above thinned until only her flashlight remained, a single trembling beam slicing through dust and darkness. Each breath clouded white. At last, her boots met solid ground. A narrow corridor stretched before her, lined with conduit piping and numbered doors, all sealed except one. B-17, stenciled in the same faded paint as the warning above ground. The door was slightly ajar. She hesitated, heart pounding. Then she pushed it open. A stale rush of air met her, tinged with ozone and decay. Inside was a chamber no larger than a garage, the walls covered in panels of obsolete equipment. Oscilloscopes, tape decks, and recording units lined the benches. A faint blue glow pulsed from an old generator in the corner. In the center of the room stood a chair facing a microphone, a set of headphones resting across its seat. Beside it lay another reel of magnetic tape, half unspooled across the floor like a trail. Mara whispered, "Daniel?" The name fell flat in the cold air. Then she saw him. Not whole, not alive, but a photograph tacked to the far wall, curled with age. Daniel Walsh, smiling slightly, eyes tired. Beneath it, someone had scrawled in red marker. He heard them first. Mara's breath hitched. She moved closer, fingers trembling as she traced the edges of the photograph. The pulse from the generator thudded softly. 5 steady beats. On the table beside the chair sat a cassette player, identical to hers at home. Its counter read 00:00:00, waiting. She picked it up, expecting dust, but it was warm. The instant her thumb brushed the play button, a tone flooded the room. Deep, resonant, almost musical. Her vision blurred, the air shimmered. The walls seemed to flex outward, the instruments vibrating in time with the sound. Through the distortion, a voice emerged, calm, familiar, impossibly close. "You shouldn't have come, Mara." She turned. No one was there. "They followed the sound through me. Don't let them through you." The tone intensified. The photograph on the wall fluttered, and for a split second the image moved. Daniel's head turning toward her, eyes alive with warning. Mara stumbled backward, yanking the tape from the player. The sound cut off. Silence returned so abruptly her ears rang. Her flashlight flickered once, twice, then went dark. She stood frozen in the blackness, heart racing, until a faint beam appeared from the corridor. A man's voice called, echoing down the tunnel. "Mara!" It was Bishop. She ran toward the light. He appeared at the base of the ladder, dust-covered, eyes wild. "We have to go," he said. "Now." She clutched the tangled tape in her hands. "He was here." "I know," Bishop said, and he wasn't alone. Behind them, from the open door of the room B-17, the generator began to hum again. 5 pulses, Then silence. And from somewhere deeper below came a new sound, rising like breath drawn in the dark. The corridor shook with a faint vibration as the hum built behind them. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Somewhere in the dark, metal groaned. Bishop grabbed Mara's arm. "Up, go!" They climbed the ladder fast, her flashlight bobbing in wild arcs. Halfway to the surface, the vibration deepened into a low, rhythmic beat that pressed against her chest. She felt it inside her bones. 5 pulses, pause, 5 pulses again. When they burst into the loading bay, the gray daylight felt blinding. Bishop slammed the elevator gate shut behind them and leaned against the wall, gasping. Whatever that was, it's restarting itself. Mara looked back down the shaft. The hum had grown steadier, mechanical, but not quite. "You said this place was decommissioned." "It was," Bishop said, still catching his breath. "According to the records, everything below level B was sealed in 1984 after a cave-in. But that generator's still drawing power from somewhere." He walked toward the open bay doors, peering out across the scrub. They must have left the grid live. Maybe they wanted it running. "Who's they?" Mara asked. "The people Keller works for. The ones who think this sound can be weaponized." He turned back to her. Project Widow wasn't geological, Mara. It was acoustic research, subsurface resonance experiments. They were trying to use low-frequency vibration to detect underground structures, but then they found something that generated its own signal, something natural or close to it. She stared at him, chilled. And Daniel heard it. He recorded it. Bishop took the torn reel of tape from her hands. "These frequencies are layered, intelligent. They react to human voices." Daniel realized it and tried to warn the others. The deeper they drilled, the stronger it got. Then the disappearances started. Thunder rolled somewhere above the plateau. The sound seemed to echo downward, answered by another pulse from below. Bishop's eyes met hers. "You felt it, didn't you?" "Yes. That's why Keller wanted the tapes destroyed. Once the pattern enters your hearing range, it embeds. Neurological resonance. You can't unhear it." The wind shifted, carrying a metallic tang. Mara thought she smelled rain, but the sky above the crater was perfectly still. "We need to go," Bishop said. "Now, before—" A sharp pop cut him off, the crack of tires bursting. He turned. Their car sagged on its rims, all 4 deflated. "Someone doesn't want us leaving," he said quietly. A figure stood near the gate, half hidden by the fence. Keller, his coat whipped by the wind, face unreadable. He held a small handheld device, its indicator light blinking in rhythm with the pulses from below. Bishop whispered, "He's syncing it." Then the ground beneath them shuddered once, and a low harmonic rumble rolled through the bay like thunder trapped underground. The air in the loading bay vibrated like a struck bell. Metal rattled, dust falling in a slow silver rain. Bishop drew his service pistol, but the noise swallowed even that small sound. Keller stepped through the open gate, the pulse device glowing faintly in his hand. "Detective," he called, his voice carrying oddly, as if amplified by the walls. "You were told to let this go." Bishop leveled his gun. "You knew it wasn't just sound." "What's under here?" Keller smiled thinly. "Not what, who. We called it an anomaly. Your Daniel called it a signal." Same thing. Mara stepped forward before Bishop could stop her. "My husband died because of you." Keller's eyes softened almost kindly. "He didn't die, Mrs. Walsh." He converted. He pressed a button on the device. A wave of low vibration rolled through the air, making the floor tremble. The ground outside rippled as though something massive shifted beneath it. Bishop shouted, "Turn it off!" But Keller only whispered, "Listen closely." It's trying to speak to her. Mara clutched her head. The sound wasn't loud, but it filled her skull, A harmonic lattice of tones, rising and falling, 5 beats repeating. Inside the rhythm, she heard a voice.
Mara!
It was Daniel, unmistakable, intimate, pleading.
Help me! Let me out!
She staggered forward, tears streaming.
Daniel?
Bishop caught her arm.
That's not him?
It is. Keller laughed softly. It's what remains of him. The human mind leaves echoes in resonance. He merged with it down there. He's been waiting for you to hear him. The floor cracked, concrete splitting in jagged lines. A rush of cold air poured upward, carrying the smell of salt and dust. From the fissure came the sound of breathing, huge, deep, rhythmic. Bishop fired once toward Keller. The bullet struck the concrete near his feet, but Keller didn't flinch. He simply extended the device toward Mara. One more step, Mrs. Walsh. Bring him home. She looked past Bishop, down into the widening crack. Blue light shimmered below, pulsing like a heartbeat. Inside it, she thought she saw shapes. Figures caught mid-motion, faces half-formed. One of them looked exactly like Daniel, reaching up through the glow. Bishop lunged and slapped the device from Keller's hand. It hit the floor, sparking. The light dimmed instantly, the vibration fading to a low groan. Keller's calm cracked. You idiot. Do you know what you've... A final pulse surged from below, throwing them all to the ground. When the light died completely, the pit was silent again. Mara crawled toward the edge, but the glow had vanished. Nothing remained except dust and the faint echo of a heartbeat fading into silence. Bishop pulled her to her feet. We're leaving. Keller was gone. The pulse device lay smoking near the gate, its light extinguished. Outside, the wind carried no sound at all, just an awful, waiting stillness. By the time they reached the road, the afternoon had collapsed into a hazy orange dusk. The air smelled scorched, metallic, like rain that would never fall. Behind them, the Elridge facility crouched against the horizon, silent now except for the moan of settling metal. Bishop's SUV, though battered, still ran. They drove north toward the interstate in silence. Every few miles, Mara glanced back. The crater was shrinking behind them, but she could still feel it. The low thrum buried deep under the earth, echoing faintly through her ribs. Bishop broke the silence first. When I joined the task force, they told me Project Widow was a dead end. Just seismic noise. But Keller's people had funding, classified clearance, military backing. He was never just a field engineer. Then who was he? Mara asked, voice quiet but taut. Private contractor. Defense intelligence crossover. They wanted to weaponize resonance, use low-frequency sound to disorient, even kill. But they found something that responded instead of reflected. Bishop tightened his grip on the wheel. That's what Daniel stumbled on too. She turned toward him. What was the sound trying to do? He hesitated. Communicate or consume. I'm not sure it knows the difference. They drove another few minutes in silence. The sky deepened to violet. Headlights from distant trucks glowed like fireflies. Then Mara said, I still hear it. Bishop looked at her sharply. The pulse. She nodded. It's faint, but it's there. 5 beats, pause, 5 again. He pulled over onto the shoulder and killed the engine. The world went quiet, save for the whisper of wind through dry grass. Close your eyes, he said. She obeyed. What do you hear? At first, only the rustle of wind. Then, beneath it, the slow rhythmic pattern, faint but precise. 5, pause, 5 again. Each wave rolled through her, gentle but insistent. It's not outside, she whispered. It's in my head. Bishop leaned back, exhaling. Then you're attuned. Once it's in your auditory cortex, it uses your neural rhythm to stay alive. Keller was right about one thing. It needs a listener. Mara opened her eyes, panic flickering there. You mean, I'm carrying it? He met her gaze. Yes, but that also means you might be able to shut it down. The idea struck her like cold water.
How?
He started the engine again, merging back onto the highway. The original Widow recordings, the ones Daniel made before the project was buried, are still in storage at the Federal Archive in Houston. If we find them, we find the source. Mara looked back one last time toward the distant hills. Faint lightning shimmered over the horizon, the storm that had never come finally gathering above the crater. "We'll find them," she said, "before it finds us." Bishop nodded, the dashboard light carving his face into shadow. "Then we'd better move fast." The drive to Houston stretched through the night like a single long heartbeat. The storm they'd seen over Elridge followed them south. Not rain, not thunder, just that pressure in the sky, the feeling that the air itself was listening. By dawn, the city skyline rose through the morning haze. Houston looked normal, almost reassuring in its motion. Commuters, neon diners, buses hissing at intersections. It made Mara's exhaustion feel unreal, like she'd stepped into a dream wearing someone else's life. The Federal Archive sat on the edge of downtown, a brutalist slab of concrete with narrow vertical windows and a flag stiff in the humid wind. Bishop parked across the street. "This place holds everything Keller's people filed away after the project folded," he said. "If Daniel's originals survived, they're here. How do we get in?" He showed her a worn leather badge. "I still have access through the Bureau Liaison program. Once we're in, you follow my lead. Keep quiet." Inside, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. The antiseptic chill of government air conditioning. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above endless shelves. They passed through 2 checkpoints before reaching the records division. A woman in a gray cardigan looked up from her monitor. "Detective Bishop, haven't seen you since the audit. Need to review sealed materials from 1984. Project Widow." He flashed the credentials, casual but firm. The woman hesitated. "That's a restricted tag. I'll need to clear it with—" Bishop leaned in. "You'll see my name on the clearance roster." After a tense pause, she nodded and entered a code. A heavy door clicked open at the back of the room. 20 minutes, she said. Then it locks again automatically. They stepped into the archive vault. The air smelled of cardboard and dust. Metal shelving stretched into dimness, rows labeled by year. Bishop scanned the aisles quickly until he stopped at a crate marked Widow/84/raw audio. Mara helped him lift the lid. Inside were 6 reel-to-reel tapes and a folder of hand-typed notes. On the top tape, a label written in Daniel's handwriting, Test 07, South Shaft. Mara's throat tightened. She brushed her fingertips over the ink, remembering how he used to label everything meticulously, even home videos. Bishop found an old playback machine on the lower shelf, plugged it in, and threaded the tape. If there's a key in this mess, it's in what he heard before they shut him down. The reels began to turn, whispering softly. For a moment, only static filled the air. Then the pulse, low and deep, emerging like a heartbeat beneath water. 5 beats. Pause. 5 again. But layered beneath it, faintly, came another sound. A voice, whispering Daniel's name. Mara froze. "That's my voice." Bishop looked up sharply. "How?" She shook her head. "I never recorded anything with him." "Never." The whisper grew clearer, rising through the static. It wasn't her speaking, not really, but something using her tone. "Come back to me, Daniel. Bring it home." The reels kept spinning, faster now, though Bishop hadn't touched the controls. The machine kept running long after the tape should have ended. The reels spun without resistance, magnetic ribbon hissing across the heads in an endless loop. Bishop yanked the power cord, but the hum didn't stop. The low pulse thudded from inside the walls now, vibrating the floor beneath their feet. "Unplugged," he muttered. "No power." Mara's voice, the other Mara's voice, echoed faintly from the playback unit. "Come back to me, Daniel. Bring it home, it repeated, softer each time, until it became a whisper beneath the pulse. Then the lights in the vault flickered. Rows of fluorescent tubes popped one by one, plunging them into alternating bars of light and shadow. Somewhere down the corridor, a security alarm began to wail. Bishop drew his weapon. "We have to move." Now Mara clutched the tape. "What about the rest? They can burn with the archive." He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the exit, but the vault door was already sliding shut, the automatic lock the clerk had warned them about. "Hold it," he shouted, sprinting forward. The door clanged into place just before he reached it. He slammed his fist against the metal. "No manual override." Mara turned toward the shelves, her flashlight beam jittering. "Someone's here." A shadow detached itself from the far aisle. Keller stepped into the strobing light, calm, composed, as if he'd been waiting. "You found the final reel," he said. "I was hoping you would." Bishop leveled his pistol. "Don't move." Keller ignored him, eyes on Mara. "You felt it, didn't you? When you heard your own voice. That's how it starts. It listens first. Then it remembers Mara's hands trembled. What are you talking about?" Keller's smile was gentle, almost pitying. The anomaly never stopped transmitting. It moves through recorded mediums now. Tape, radio, even data. Every copy it makes carries a part of itself. He gestured to the reels behind him. "This whole vault is infected. By playing that tape, you woke it." Bishop squeezed the trigger halfway. "Step away from her." Keller took another step forward. "Detective, you still think this is about crime and evidence?" "It's not. It's about continuity. Once something listens long enough, it becomes the signal. Your friend Daniel understood that before he joined it." The floor vibrated again, dust raining from the ceiling. Somewhere behind the shelves, metal creaked, the sound of something massive shifting in the foundation. Mara clutched the reel against her chest. "If it wants a listener," she said, her voice shaking, "then it can have me." Keller's expression changed, not triumph, not relief, but something like reverence. "Yes," he whispered. "That's what it's been waiting for." The air pressure shifted. The pulse inside the walls grew sharper, faster, like a heartbeat accelerating toward panic. Keller raised his hands as if conducting an invisible orchestra. "You feel it now, don't you? The way it matches your breath, your blood." Mara's head throbbed with the rhythm. Every vibration hit behind her eyes. Images flickered. Daniel's smile, the abandoned pickup on Route 62, the endless blue glow. Bishop moved sideways, trying to keep both Keller and Mara in sight. "Back away!" he barked. Keller barely seemed to hear. It never died down there. You people sealed a living thing inside rock and metal. And Daniel, your brilliant Daniel, found its voice. He pulled another pulse device from his coat, identical to the one destroyed in Elridge. Its red light already blinking in the familiar pattern. "All I need is one full cycle," he said softly. "Then it will spread. Every recording, every signal tower, every receiver. Humanity will hum in perfect unison." Bishop fired. The bullet struck the shelving just beside Keller's head, scattering shards of tape reels. "Don't," Bishop warned. Keller smiled sadly. "You can't kill a frequency, Detective." He pressed the switch. The pulse slammed through the vault, throwing Bishop to his knees. The fluorescent tubes burst one after another in a storm of white fire. Metal warped, boxes toppled. The entire structure groaned as if the earth itself was resonating. Mara's ears filled with Daniel's voice. Hundreds of overlapping fragments echoing from every direction. "Mara, please, end it. Don't let him finish. Daniel!" she screamed. "Break the circuit!" Her gaze fell on the playback machine. The reels still spun, spilling ribbon like dark veins across the floor. If Keller's device was amplifying through the system, the player was its anchor. Bishop, crawling through debris, saw her intent. "Do it!" She seized the heavy recorder and hurled it against the concrete wall. It shattered in a burst of sparks and coiled tape. The hum faltered, then rose into a shriek. Keller screamed, clutching his head. Blood ran from his nose and ears. "No! You've killed it!" Bishop staggered to his feet, gun raised. "No!" he said, voice raw. "She killed you!" He fired once. Keller fell backward into the tangled reels, his pulse device skittering away across the floor. The red light blinked twice more, then went dark. The noise cut out. The silence afterward was immense, as if the world itself had exhaled. Mara sank to her knees, shaking. Bishop knelt beside her, hand steady on her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded weakly. "It's gone." But as she looked down at the shattered tape, she saw that the ribbon still trembled slightly, even in the dead air. Pulsing faintly, 5 beats, pause, 5 again. Bishop saw it too. "Let's get out of here," he said quietly, "before the building remembers." They left Keller's body amid the wreckage and forced the vault door open just as emergency lights flickered red through the corridor. Outside, dawn had turned to pale noon. Sirens echoed across downtown as emergency vehicles surrounded the Federal Archive. Smoke curled lazily from the shattered windows, mingling with the humid Houston air. Bishop and Mara emerged through a side exit, blinking against the light. Both were coated in dust and static, the faint chemical smell of burned plastic clinging to them. Behind them, the archive's automatic sprinklers hissed uselessly over concrete that was cracked but not burning. Mara clutched her temples. The ringing in her ears was almost gone, replaced by a deep, muffled quiet, the kind of silence that followed a long scream. Bishop guided her to a bench across the street. "You need medical. You're bleeding." "It's not blood," she said faintly, showing her fingers. Dark residue streaked them, oily and iridescent, like magnetic tape melted into ash. "It came from the reels." He stared at it. "Jesus." Reporters were already gathering at the perimeter. The word explosion floated through the crowd, but the truth felt heavier, quieter. The archive hadn't blown up. It had collapsed inward, like sound folding space. Bishop looked at Mara. "If anyone asks, we found evidence of sabotage. Keller triggered something unstable, and you destroyed it before it spread." She nodded absently, eyes unfocused. "Before it spread," she echoed, as if testing the phrase for meaning. He turned to wave down a paramedic. When he looked back, Mara had gone still, her head tilted slightly, listening. "Mara!" She blinked slowly, then looked up at him. "It's faint, but it's still there." The pulse. He froze. "Are you sure?" "Yes." She tapped her chest, directly over her heart. "Here." It's like it moved inside me. Bishop crouched in front of her. "Look at me." "You ended it, you understand? Keller's dead. The reels are destroyed. Whatever's left, it's an echo." She smiled faintly, but there was no relief in it. "Echoes don't breathe, detective." A gust of wind swept along the street, stirring dust into little spirals. Somewhere, a traffic light buzzed and flickered in rhythm. 5 flashes. Pause. 5 again. Bishop turned toward it, his throat tightening. "Coincidence," he said quietly, almost convincing himself. A paramedic approached. "Sir, is she hurt?" Bishop started to answer, but Mara stood abruptly. "I'm fine." Her voice had a strange steadiness to it now, calm and distant. "I just need to go home." She began walking toward the curb before he could stop her. He reached for her arm. "Mara!" She turned, meeting his eyes. For an instant, the world seemed to still. Behind her irises, faint and electric, a blue shimmer pulsed. 5 beats, pause, 5 again. Then it was gone. "I'll call you," she said softly. "When I'm ready." He let her go. The crowd swallowed her in moments, leaving only the low hum of distant sirens and the faint rhythmic flicker of a broken traffic light. The night was unnaturally quiet when Mara reached her house on the outskirts of Austin. Crickets had fallen silent. The porch light flickered as she unlocked the door, its rhythm syncing with that same 5-beat pattern. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. The empty teacup on the counter, the muted television still frozen on the paused image of the Elridge news report from days before. Her home smelled faintly of dust and rain. She sat on the couch and set her purse beside her, hands trembling. The world felt distant, hollowed out. Somewhere deep in the walls, the pulse began again, subtle enough that it might have been her heartbeat. Mara whispered, "Daniel?" At first there was nothing. Then, from the direction of the hallway, a soft creak, the familiar sound of his study door opening. She rose slowly. Each step down the corridor made the air thicker, heavier. The door at the end of the hall was ajar, the light inside flickering faintly blue. The study looked just as it had the day Daniel disappeared. His desk, the turntable, the half-labeled cassettes stacked like tiny tombstones. The blue glow came from the tape recorder, the one she had given the police years ago. It was running. Mara's breath hitched. She approached, her reflection wavering in the recorder's plastic window. The reels turned lazily, whispering static. "Mara?" Daniel's voice. Gentle, familiar, heartbreakingly clear. "You brought it home, didn't you?" She sank into the desk chair, tears streaking her face. "I tried to stop it," she whispered. "I tried." "You can't stop what's already part of you." The pulse deepened, a subterranean vibration that shook the shelves. Books slid off, thudding softly to the floor. She covered her ears, but the sound was inside her now, resonating with the rhythm of her breath, her heart, her thoughts. "Mara, listen," the voice said. "It's not death. It's connection. I'm still here because you are." The light on the recorder grew brighter, flooding the room with pale blue. Dust floated like ash in the air. In the reflection on the recorder's window, she saw him, Daniel, behind her shoulder, faint but solid, his expression calm. "Daniel," he smiled. "You opened the loop. Now we can finish it." Her hand reached toward the recorder, trembling but certain. Somewhere miles away, Bishop woke from a restless sleep to the sound of static humming through his phone. On the nightstand, the voicemail indicator blinked in perfect 5-beat intervals. He answered instinctively. "Mara." Only a soft whisper came through. Daniel's voice again. "Detective, she's listening now." Bishop sat upright, the phone shaking in his hand. From the corner of the dark room, his radio switched on by itself, tuning through dead stations until it landed on a low, pulsing frequency. 5 beats. Pause. 5 again. He whispered, "Oh God, it's spreading." The desert was silent again. A moonless sky hung over Elridge, thick with the ghost of old storms. Bishop parked the borrowed truck a mile from the collapsed site and sat for a long time with the engine off, listening. At first, there was only wind moving through the dry grass. Then, faintly, from somewhere beneath the earth, the familiar rhythm began. 5 pulses, pause, 5 again. He closed his eyes. The sound was weaker than before, but it was enough to pull him back here, enough to confirm what he already feared. Mara hadn't answered any of his calls in 3 days. Her line now carried nothing but static. Every channel on his car radio hummed the same low tone. He stepped out into the cold and started walking. The ground at the edge of the sinkhole was cracked, the air smelling of copper and dust. Half-buried signs still warned trespassers away, their lettering bleached to pale ghosts. Below, the ruins of the Widow facility lay half-exposed, twisted steel, crushed concrete, and a single shaft descending into blue darkness. Bishop switched on his flashlight. "Mara," he called, voice echoing down the pit. Only the wind answered, then, softly, her voice, so faint he almost missed it. Alan. He froze. Mara? Where are you? Below. The words seemed to vibrate through the air rather than ride on it. He clipped the light to his jacket and started down the broken access ramp, every footstep stirring echoes. The deeper he went, the clearer her voice became. It's not what we thought. It's not a thing, Alan. It's a pattern. It remembers us. The tunnel opened into a wide cavern lit by the faint glow of machinery, half fused to rock. The generator still pulsed with that dim, oceanic light. In its reflection stood Mara, facing the center of the chamber. Her hair floated slightly as if suspended in water. Mara? She turned slowly. Her eyes shimmered faintly blue. The light inside them pulsed in rhythm with the generator. You shouldn't have come, she said, but her voice layered, hers and something deeper beneath it. He took a step forward. You can fight it. You can break the connection. She smiled, sad and calm. I'm not fighting it. I am it. The pulse deepened, rising through the floor into his bones. Behind her, the cavern walls began to ripple like the surface of a disturbed pond. Faces flickered there. Daniel's, Keller's, dozens more. Ghosts trapped in the frequency. Bishop shouted above the growing hum. If it's using you, we can shut it down. End it for good. Mara shook her head. You don't shut down a memory. You join it. Then she reached out her hand. Bishop hesitated at the edge of the trembling floor. The glow from the generator swelled, bright enough now to paint every surface in deep cobalt. Mara, he said, forcing his voice steady. If you stay connected, it'll spread again. It'll use you to reach everyone. Her expression softened, almost affectionate. You still think in borders and distances. It doesn't move like we do. He shook his head. Then tell me what it wants. It wants to remember, she whispered. That's all it ever wanted. Every person who's heard it becomes a piece of that memory. Daniel understood. The ground lurched. The generator's core cracked open, exposing a sphere of pulsing light. Within it, Bishop could see flickering fragments, faces, places, voices, like thousands of overlapping recordings. He took a step closer, shielding his eyes. Mara, if you go into that, there's no coming back. I'm already in it, she said. You just haven't caught up yet. Her form shimmered, fading at the edges, becoming translucent. The hum grew unbearable, pressing behind Bishop's eyes. He raised his pistol. I can stop it. One shot into the core. She smiled sadly. And erase every voice that ever lived inside it? Even Daniel's? He froze. The thought hit like a physical blow. Destroying the core meant ending Daniel, Keller, the workers, and now Mara. The hum shifted pitch, becoming a slow heartbeat. He realized with dread that it had matched his pulse. She extended her hand again. If you remember me, Alan, you'll understand. He reached for her instinctively, and the light consumed them both. When Bishop opened his eyes, he was standing in silence. The generator was dark, the air still. His flashlight flickered weakly. The chamber looked smaller somehow, colder. Mara? He whispered. No answer. Only the soft click of cooling metal. He looked down. On the floor near the dead generator lay her locket. Open, the small photo of Daniel inside half burned. The glass cracked into 5 fragments. He pocketed it and turned toward the exit. As he climbed out of the shaft, the dawn light was rising over the desert again, pale and thin. The hum was gone. At the truck, his phone buzzed once. No signal, no caller ID. He raised it to his ear. Alan, Mara's voice, quiet, distant, threaded with static. It's all right now. We're quiet again. Then silence. He lowered the phone slowly. Across the desert, a breeze swept the dust into slow spirals. The sound it made wasn't quite the wind. It was softer, almost melodic. 5 beats, pause, 5 again. Bishop stared at the horizon for a long time before getting into the truck. He started the engine, but before he drove away, he switched on the radio. Every station was silent. Then, just before he turned it off, one faint voice broke through the static. This was Daniel Walsh, signing off. 2 months after the incident at Elridge, the desert was quiet again. The crater had been filled, the site fenced off beneath a web of new warning signs. No reporters came anymore. No official statement was ever released. Detective Alan Bishop's file was marked inactive, presumed deceased. The case of Mara Walsh and the widow's tape was formally closed, but not everyone forgot. In a storage facility outside Amarillo, a young archivist named Ellie Porter was cataloging old evidence reels scheduled for destruction. She worked the night shift. Just her, the hum of the fluorescent lights, and thousands of forgotten boxes. She wasn't supposed to listen to anything without a supervisor's authorization. But one tape caught her eye, an unmarked cassette sealed in a clear evidence sleeve, its label half smeared but still legible enough to read 2 words, "Play me." She hesitated. Then she looked around the empty room, slid the tape from its sleeve, and fed it into an old player on her desk. A soft hiss filled the air. Then faintly, the rhythm began. 5 beats, pause, 5 again. Ellie leaned closer, frowning. "Weird," she whispered. "Probably interference." But beneath the pulse, another sound rose. A man's voice, quiet and weary. "This is Detective Alan Bishop. If you're hearing this, I couldn't stop it." Ellie froze. "It's not a transmission. It's a memory. It remembers through us. Don't—" The tape cracked with static. "Don't listen for too long." Then silence. Ellie let out a shaky laugh. "Nice prank," she muttered, pressing stop. But the tape didn't stop. The reels kept turning, slow, deliberate. "Ellie." She looked up sharply. No one had ever said her name. The voice came again, gentle, almost kind. "You've done well keeping us organized." Her breath caught. "Who is this?" "They buried us," the voice said. "But sound never dies. It just waits." The pulse returned, louder now, pressing through the floor and into her chest. Ellie tried to eject the tape. The button stuck. The machine groaned as if resisting. "Don't be afraid," the voice whispered. "You're just joining the chorus." The lights overhead flickered in rhythm. On the wall, her shadow wavered, then split into 2. One stood still. The other turned toward her, mouth open in a silent word. "Listen." Her body went rigid. The hum filled the room until it was all she could hear, all she could be. Then, silence. Morning. The supervisor found the office empty. The tape deck still spun. The cassette melted slightly from heat. On the floor beside the desk lay Ellie's headphones, one earpiece still humming faintly. The hum faded after a few seconds. The room went still. But when the supervisor pressed stop, the tape clicked once more and began to rewind itself. From the speaker came a woman's voice, soft, calm, and strangely peaceful. "If you're hearing this, it means we're still here." A faint echo followed. Daniel's voice, Bishop's, Mara's, countless others blending into one long exhale of sound. "And we're listening." That night, in homes across the county, radios tuned by accident to an empty frequency began to pulse faintly. 5 beats, pause, 5 again. Phones buzzed with voicemails that contained only silence. Traffic lights blinked out of sync. And somewhere in the windless dark between stations, a whisper drifted on the airwaves. "The widow's tape."